Chapter 6, Geometry. We start with property of angles. There are four types of angles we should be familiar with. We have acute angle, right angle, obtuse, and straight. Acute angle is any angle that's between 0 and 90 degrees. Right angle is exactly 90 degrees with this symbol right here. There's a little symbol like a little square. They're indicating this angle is exactly 90 degrees, therefore it's a right angle. Obtuse is any angle that's bigger than 90 but smaller than 180. And when you have an angle flat all the way on a straight line, this now is called a straight angle. Now the angle, the very tip of each angle is called a vertex. Just need to be familiar with all the terminologies. Okay. Now if you have two angles, now you have A and B. If two acute angles, they add up together equal to 90 degrees, we call it complementary angles. And if you have two angles that add up to be 180 degrees, we call it supplementary angles. So let's look at this angle right here. Look at a straight angle ABC. So we follow the letters A, B, C. That's this angle right here. Find the measurement of DBC. So this empty spot right here, how much is it? Well, we know ABC is 180 degrees because it's a straight angle. Then we take 180 minus 136, you get 44 degrees. So these two angles are supplementary. Now this is an example of a complementary angles. So the missing angle here, it got to be 90 minus 67, so it's 23 degrees. Triangle. Now we all know what triangle look like, okay, but we need to know what type of triangle we're looking at it. So to classify the type of triangle, we can do it by a couple of different ways. We can do it by the sides. If we have all sides are equal, okay, or like this middle one right here, we call this equilateral triangle. If two of the sides equal, but the third side is not, so it's symmetrical on left and right side here. So this right here is called an isosceles triangle. If none of the sides are equal at all in a triangle, we call this scaling triangle. Okay. Now, of course, if we want to identify our triangle by its angles, then we can look like this. Acute triangle, okay, will be a triangle with three acute angles. Obtuse triangle will have one angle that's obtuse angle and the other two acute. And right triangle will be one of the angle in the triangle has to be 90 degrees. And the sum of the or three or any triangle, sum of the three interior angles add up to be 180 degrees. Okay, so if a triangle has two angles that's 35 and 75, how do we find a third one? We know altogether it has to be 180 degrees, so we take 180 minus 35 minus 75 equal to 70 degrees. Now, same question here, except they only tell you 57, but they tell you one of the angle is a right angle. Now, we need to know that right angle means 90 degrees. So if you take 180 minus the right angle minus the 57, the third angle that's missing is 33 degrees. Here's our famous Pythagorean theorem. Now, Pythagorean theorem only works in a right triangle. Only works in a right triangle. Not any triangle you want. Okay. Now, when we look at the right triangle, the longest side, which is a side, have to be across from the 90-degree angle, the right angle. This side we call that hypotenuse. Now, hypotenuse, we traditionally like to label this as C, that's the longest one, and the other two legs we don't care, A or B, these two can be interchangeable. And the equation for this relationship between these three sides is A squared plus B squared equal to the longest side, C squared. Okay, so how do you use Pythagorean theorem? So here it is, C is missing. Now we just need to identify the longest side, which happen to be C. So that goes in the end. Now the other two, 3 and 4, could be either way. So 3 squared plus 4 squared equal to C squared. Now we figure this out. 9 plus 16 equal to C squared. Now how do we when you have C squared equal to 25, how do we solve for C? Remember the opposite of square is square root. So we take a square root of 25. So answer is 5. Here's another same question, but different sides are missing. This time you have the hypotenuse. You have the longest one, 13 is in the end, but you're missing one of the legs. So which is right here. I'm going to put B here. So 12 squared plus B squared equals 13 squared. When you do a little bit algebra here, that's 144 plus B squared equals 169. We minus 144 on both sides. We get 25 when we take a square root. So B equal to 5. Okay. Now, word problem involving right triangles. If we have a cell bowl that is has a large cell, here's a cell, okay, where the longest edge of the cell is 17, so longest side, which is what hypotenuse, right? So 17 yard right here, and we have a bottom of the cell is A. We want to know how tall the cell is. Okay, so again, identify where's the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is 17. That goes in the end. The other two doesn't matter, as long as we square and add them up. So x squared plus 64 equal to 289 minus 64 on both sides. We got 225. When you take a square root, you get 15. So how tall is this? The height of the cell is 15 yards. Now, similar triangle. The way the similar triangle works is, now these two triangles are similar. Similar means why they have the same proportion. So if they have the same proportion, we're going to utilize what we learned about proportion in the previous chapters. So if we want to try to figure out what x is, well, proportion means, well, if these two are similar, the hypotenuse must similar to the hypotenuse. These two, 66 and x, must have the same proportion as 42 to 35. So if I decide to put 66 on top, 42 on the bottom, then I have to do the same thing with the second triangle. I have to put a hypotenuse on top and the leg on the bottom. Then we do cross multiply like we learned before. Then when you divide 10 by 42, you get 55 feet. So the missing x here, this hypotenuse, is 55 feet. Okay, same thing with this one. If you want to do y over 42, must equal to 15 over 63 proportion. We cross multiply. So y times 63 is 63y. 42 times 15 is 630. Divide by 63 on both sides. Y give you 10 meters. In chapter 6.2, now we're looking at perimeter, circumference, and area. Now, we look at triangle. The next show we're going to look at it is something called a quadrilateral. So triangle has 3 sides, quadrilateral have 4 sides, and quadrilateral has interior angle, all the angles sum up to be 360 instead of 180. Now, here's a couple different type of quadrilateral. The first one is a parallelogram. Parallelogram characteristic is the 2 sides opposite each other is parallel, and the angle opposite each other are equal. Now, rectangle, square, and rhombus all belong to parallelogram. If you look at the other 3 figures, they all have the characteristic of parallelogram, but even more. For example, rectangle not only is a special type of parallelogram, not only it has all the characteristic of the parallelogram, plus we need to have all the angles are equal. So if you look, these angles are all 90 degrees. Now, rhombus is the opposite of rectangle. It is a parallelogram as well, but instead of equal angles, this one has equal sides. Now, square is really the product of rectangle and rhombus. It is a special parallelogram, but also it's a special rectangle and rhombus, because square has all equal angles, just like the rectangle, but all equal sides as well, just like the rhombus. Now, here's a quadrilateral that's missing an angle. Okay, so missing a couple angles actually. Now, if this quadrilateral here, if we know this is a parallelogram, they should say this is a parallelogram. Then if this 60 is given to you, then parallelogram says across has to be the same. Now, how do you know these two are 120 each? Well, if you think about the whole thing is 360. If we take 360 minus 60 minus 60, then you divide by 2. What's left over, you divide equally by 2. Then you find out it's 240 divided by 2. That's why these are 120 each. If you double check your answers, you add up all 4 angles, should equal to 360, because they're 360 degrees in a quadrilateral. All right, now looking at the parameters and areas. Okay, here are some common the formulas for parameters and area. Okay, so let's use these real quick. So if you have a quadrilateral here, this is a parallelogram, right? Okay, so what's a parameter? Parameter is what the shape, what goes around it. Okay, if you're going to put a fence around this thing, how much fence do you need? So 4 is on the bottom, 2.3 on the side. Now you have 2 sets of it, because top and bottom is the same, 4 and 4. And left and right, 2.3. 2.3 is the same. That's why we take 2 times. When you add them up, it's 12.6 centimeters. Notice the unit is the same as the original unit here. But area, on the other hand, is base times height. So base is 4, height is 2. Now, how do you know which number to use as base and height? Look for where it's perpendicular, 90-degree angle here. So you have a 4 here, you have 2 here, so 4 times 2, it's 8. Now, the units is a centimeter. When we talk about area, it's centimeter times centimeter. That's why it's centimeter square. Now we have this combination figures. Let's say look at this combination figures. So you really have a rectangle and a triangle here if we cut them up. So all right, so we need to find all the missing parts. All right, the first thing we're looking at it. Okay, we look at this triangle here. This triangle is really a right triangle. Okay, this is a straight edge here. So you have, if you look at this, okay, what couple of things we need to know. So if you have a 7 on the bottom here. Okay, and then you have 4 on top here. So if you take 7 minus 4, that's how we know this bottom, this triangle here is 3. Now, if you're looking at this triangle only, okay, don't look at the rectangle yet. You have 3 on one side, 5, which is the hypotenuse, and a missing x. So let's solve for x first. So let's use Pythagorean theorem again. X squared plus 3 squared equal to 5 squared. So x squared plus 9 equal to 25. When you minus 9 on both sides, x squared equal to 16. Then when you take a square root, x equal to 4. All right, now we know this is 4. Now, if this whole length on the side here of the rectangle is 6, x is 4, then y must be 2. Notice the figures are drawn to scale, so need to be careful with that, okay? So x is 4, y is 2, because together you have 6 here. All right, now if all the missing pieces are in place now, so we find them all, now we can figure out a parameter. Parameter is what goes around, what goes outside of a figure. So you have a 6 plus 4 on top, a 2, we figure it out, a 5 coming down, and a 7. Together is 24 yard. Now, as far as for area-wise, you have a rectangle plus a triangle. Okay, so area of a rectangle is length times width, so which is 6 times 4. Then triangle is 1/2. Don't forget it's 1/2 a triangle times base times height. So the triangle, the base is 3. The height is what? Is 4. That's why it's 1/2 times 3 times 4. When you multiply all this and add them up, the answer is 30. Again, careful with the unit. The unit is yard square.